Hello, David McMillan here, retired smuggler, answering questions that people think they want to ask, but often don't. Well, little Ziggy has been given his first mobile phone, and he's been following the sentencing of the biggest nutcase I've come across in a while since I was in maximum security. Yes, who is it? It's Brenton Tarrant. Now, that's a name that was asking for trouble, wasn't it? Tarrant, of all things. And he's killed 51 people in Christchurch, New Zealand. Right bastard, eh? Yeah, but that's really beside the point. I'm not here to state the obvious. People might be wondering what kind of prison he'll do. Hard time? Oh, a hard time to contemplate, but I've seen his kind before. Australian Brenton Tarrant, named after the top of a tank, he made a bit of notoriety, or quite a lot, by live streaming his own massacre. Yeah, he killed 51 people at a mosque, and it was extremely, well, I don't like to use the word well planned, but thoughtfully planned in a scumbaggish way. He chose the time when there would be a lot of people, and he even studied the exits on the mosques, wondering if they fled that direction, whether he could pick them up on the other side. He had his own pet gun. Tarrant had painted the names of often commanders or even places where battles against the early kings of Islam had taken place, which had not been favourable to the Islamic side. He painted these on the gun that he had, an assault rifle. Done in a rather amateurish way, but he obviously thought about it for a long time. But let's put all of that aside. If you want those grisly details, they're not hard to find. It took place in Christchurch, which is quite a peaceable town. There will be many who are hoping that Brenton Tarrant's life in prison will be quite horrible, and it will, but oddly enough, it won't bother him too much. Firstly, look at him. He's got that, can you make characteristics of character out of physical features? In his case, they rather lend themselves to it. I suppose my training in belief dynamics for the great ad agency for which I worked many years ago would put him as a type 4B. That means you won't be able to sell him fashion items, but consumables, he'll take all he can get. He has those little dark eyes set too close together in a macrocephalic skull, a little poison dwarf short man syndrome going on there for sure. But apart from his ugly characteristics, they seem very familiar because I've come across in maximum security prisons people like him many times. They actually get along very well inside there. Now, in his case, he will have the delusion that the prison guards, that is the white Anglo-New Zealand prison guards, will somehow be on his side. Well, they won't. They will know him for the loathsome toad that he is. As for killing Muslims, well, of course, they won't approve of that, though there'll be a few who think, well, it happened, and perhaps in some way it's a little bit of white man's payback, but I'm sure even they would not like to imagine that this is the critter behind that. I don't think he'll get the kind of warm welcome from security guards and prison guards that he seems to think he will. But I'm sure he misinterprets everything that happens around him, so he probably thinks he's on an upper echelon. Not exactly a hero, but he will misinterpret every smirk and smile from authority, which is really ridicule, as somehow approval for his actions. After sentencing, Tarrant will be returned to Auckland's Delta block in the main Auckland prison. It's fairly new. It's got some features that are familiar to me from when I was in maximum security in Melbourne. That is hydraulically operated electric doors and controlled air, beds built into the very structure of the cell itself. If you take a look at some of the images I'm putting up near me here, you'll see that even the toilet and sink is solid steel, which means you can't pick it up and do anything with it. Of course, the water can be cut off as well. Perhaps they have a kind of regime where they limit the amount of flushing that can be done. In fact, I recall that is one of the features of the place. The tap will only run for so long before having to be reset. Very difficult to jam it on to flood the place. That's one thing. And what, would he be able to escape from that sort of prison? I'm not saying anything's impossible, but certainly the walls, which are a special kind of concrete, and nothing that could be scraped through with a spoon, or the rock hammer that was used once in fiction. Even the window bars are structured with steel kind of spokes and radials within them that would mean cutting through it in a straight hack would be very difficult, very slow, and probably a bit too noisy as well. Anyway, he will never try it because Tarrant will blend in there. He will become part of the works. Now, when he gets in, I would say that within the first 12 months, in the limited time that he'll be allowed to move around from his cell, he will get into a dispute with somebody else in Delta Block who had a reputation, or is certainly another murderer. He will be eyeing off the other murderers. Nobody will top his record of 51. He'll feel confident about that. But nonetheless, he'll feel obliged to treat that person as an enemy. Now, I know those sneaky little shits, and he will scheme against that person, and I predict that within a year he will land himself in trouble with somebody there. So what will that mean? That means his out-of-cell exercise time will be limited to being by himself. That will go on for some time. But extraordinary as it is, he will eventually move from that place. It won't be in any great hurry, but the time will come. At some point, probably in a decade or so, it will be found that he's had sexual encounters with some young man that was put into that security section for protection, because those places always end up being fundamentally that, a place to house the oddballs and the freaks, and often those who are vulnerable in some kind of psychotic way, who have episodes of violence. Now that will be an odd one. And hopefully he might be killed by his young man. But his leanings are definitely in that direction. There was a time in prisons when notorious killers would start their lives there in maximum security and more or less work their way through to reduced security conditions and get to a place where they could kill somebody else. This will take a lot longer now. That kind of movement really only takes place when somebody's out of the public mind, and he's not likely to be for quite a long time. He will be so twisted and warped by the conditions in there, by the isolation from anything, that he will probably be worse. He's a great schemer and plotter, so he will scheme and plot to no avail except other inmates. He will be protected from them, and they will be protected from him. Perhaps he'll have a pen pal. I expect he will. And some very strange girl will want to marry him. And that's where you'll hear of him next, I guess in about 15 years or so. For those who might seek some vengeance, they won't have it, unfortunately, with him. There's no turning back the clock, of course, and his mind is so overlaid with self-absorption, nothing in there will change anything except twist it further. So his time will mean nothing of any real suffering that they might wish for. And as for entertainment value to the outside world, gloatishly looking in, sadly, that won't even be passing anything. No, he's left to the fortunes of the prison system there and the needs and the changes that might happen in 30 years' time. But something tells me he simply won't be alive. Or he'll be so insignificant in features that we just can't remember him being alive.